So we are live on YouTube.
Welcome back to Tech Ops. I'm Greg. I'm here with Eric, as always. And we're going to have Doc on again to talk about part two for the coronavirus podcast we had a couple months ago. But first, before we get into that, our sponsor, the Commando Store. It's an online military surplus store. Eric, I know you've been saying you've heard a lot of good things about them. Different deals they have going on, selling things pretty much at cost for different first responders. Yeah, I have it pulled up here real quick before we get started. Let's make sure this is working. Can anyone hear me right now? Let me know if you can hear me.
I hear you.
Yeah, I have it pulled up here. Oh, okay. So I can hear myself on YouTube. We
Oh,
can't
here we
hear you,
go.
Eric.
Hold on, here we go. I had one button not clicked. Sorry. So I just talked about that for no reason. So I'm glad you guys were staring at that screen for nothing. But I'm pretty sure I got it now. So anyway, sorry. Let me backtrack a little bit. So Commando Store, big sponsor. They have a free, not sorry, I shouldn't say free, but at cost offer for EMS, fire, police. I wish it was free. That'd be cool. Hospitals for supplies for this COVID for coronavirus. So if you're fire, EMS, police, hospitals, public service, whatever it is, you can click on this red banner at the top, fill out a form, and they will send you supplies at cost. It's a huge deal. A lot of people have been talking about it online. They've been getting a lot of really good press from Vice and some other bigger not necessarily mainstream but bigger stream news outlets and stuff. So they've done a lot of big things lately. I really enjoy the Commando Store. They've been such I couldn't ask for a more unique a sponsor for us. I think they're great. And one of the things that everybody's also talking about is how they're giving away a bunch of this wheat flour. They're giving away 50 pounds of wheat flour. They talk. Oh, here you go. You can see the little link right here, featured on Vice and Infowars. Obviously Infowars, because that's where you're gonna have a lot of your your people trying to survive out in the wilderness. But flour, one bag, 50 days. 50 days costs $25. Like I said before, you probably can't eat the flour for 7 weeks, but it does supply you for some other stuff. So definitely check them out. They are an amazing sponsor for us, and they've been there since the beginning. So, and I don't see them going anywhere anytime soon. So
Yeah, they have been. That's Commando Store, Commando with a K, store.com, and you get 5% off your first order with coupon code TACOPS. No space in between that. All right, Doc, thanks for coming back on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So the first thing I guess we have to bring up is our last episode. So last time, I believe it was, when was that? That was early February, right?
Yeah, start of February, 1st or 2nd of February, I think.
Um, so we kind of ended that episode thinking that this was pretty much over. And I believe we said in there, you specifically said in there that you think this is coming to an end. It's going to be over unless we have any more super speeder events, which is actually exactly what ended up happening. We had three of them, right? We had South Korea, Iran, and Italy.
Yeah, we were perfectly right as seen from a Chinese point of view and horribly wrong from the perspective of everyone else. Because that's what happened, I think. At least in the
Right?
case of Italy. Northern
Yeah,
Italy
China
has a lot
popped off.
of, yeah, and Northern Italy has a lot of contacts with China, So when they then flew or traveled or whatever happened, they produced a new similar event in Italy, as you said. That's what contaminated Europe.
Hmm. So South Korea makes Italy makes sense, and South Korea makes sense because they do a lot of trading, obviously, with China. What about Iran? How do we know how it got to Iran? Because Iran's not a. I mean, I guess China's a decent sized trading partner of them.
Well, isn't geopolitically the contact between China and Iran said to be sort of good buddies?
Yeah,
Aren't they? Aren't
it's
they allies in some sense and
yeah,
traders?
pretty much. So, it must have gone through there somewhere. The one thing I've always been interested in is I've seen a lot of people in the mainstream media and everywhere in the U.S. at least. They kept saying, and they are still saying, that Iran is lying about their numbers, and that they have a lot more cases than they actually have. I've always wondered why we say that, because everyone's saying the U.S. probably has a lot more numbers, but they never said the U.S. is lying about it. We just say that, oh, we don't have enough testing yet. But do we really think Iran has enough testing if the U.S. doesn't even have enough?
Well, numbers at this point is not the truth. I mean, you have when somebody dies of the virus but has a serious heart condition, are they dying of the virus or the heart condition? Are they? You see what I'm saying? Is the
Exactly. Yeah.
virus making the heart condition worse, or is the heart condition making it possible to die from the virus? And some pathologists will register that in favor of the virus, and some will rule it in favor of the heart disease, right? So, who's is every death now in every if you note down every death in the morgue now as a result of virus, if they're COVID positive, then you will be contaminated numbers in one direction, right? Then you would add more death than it actually produces.
I've seen pretty much every. If somebody dies and they tested positive for the coronavirus, it's marked as a coronavirus death,
Yeah,
regardless
exactly.
if that was the real reason they died or not.
Yeah,
I thought I saw a number from Italy that they said 75%. I don't remember the exact number, but 75% of the people who died from the coronavirus were expected to die in the next year anyway.
exactly. And so numbers are now academic in nature, I think. Hard to have them represent the truth. So that's a difference between being unable to measure something and actively lying.
So, what is a better way of trying to get a true sense of the scale? Is it to look at maybe hospitalizations or people on ventilators?
I'd say that the amount of people on ventilators would be somewhat representative, but this has shown itself to be a condition or a virus or a disease manifesting itself in different ways. You can die of kidney failure here, or you can die of lung failure, right? So, and who's who? So, but I would say that the ICU numbers are pretty accurate, and I'd say that when the morgues are handling 45 people, no, sorry, one deceased per 45 minutes, it probably has something to do with this, right? it's a result of the epidemic. But then you have to compare it, like you said, would they have seen next Christmas? And probably not. And then it becomes difficult to keep actual numbers from artifacts. But look at the ICUs. I'd say that you have a sense of what the normal demands is on an ICU, and you can compare that to what the numbers are now. I would say that is one way of assessing the load on the health care services now. Yes.
So, um, let's see. If so, I think the fatality rate numbers is what everyone is interested in right now.
Oh yeah.
You know, how many people are actually dying from this thing? And if you just did, so Eric has the Johns Hopkins site pulled up right now. You
Yep.
have 1.7 million people have it, and over 100,000 people have died. So it's what is it, like 7% of people? So if you just took that number, that sounds pretty high. Or if you look at places like Italy or Spain, they have around 10%.
Yep.
Then you look at other places like we were talking about Sweden earlier. Sweden has about 1% or 2%, very low. So
Yeah.
how do we even figure that out? Because obviously we just discussed the difficulty in even knowing if coronavirus was the reason this person died, and then there's a bigger question of how many people actually even have it.
Yeah, and let's say that every death Johns Hopkins has registered, all 107,000 are actually due to corona. You know, then that would be the case fatality rate. What you're looking at on the if you're looking at the same thing, the coronavirus site of Johns Hopkins, right? The
Yes.
map of the world, yeah. Then that would be the case fatality rate, the rate of deaths within those confirmed cases. If you want what's called the infection fatality rate, the true death toll of the virus, then you would have to know how many are actually infected, because the total confirmed are just those who have tested positive. And what's the sensitivity of these tests and what's the specificity of these tests? That's not really something that people care about now, which means the numbers aren't that reliable. Um, and that's where that other paper from Singapore comes into play, where they actually tested the feces actually of Singapore, the brown water, to try to calculate their way back to how many infected people are there, and found out the difference between confirmed cases and actual cases was about 200,
Wow.
which means that if you multiply in the in the Johns Hopkins page the total confirmed number 1.7 million by 200, then you have the actual total infected if the Singapore numbers are representative.
So there's so that potentially would mean that the death rate or the lethality rate is much lower, the true lethality rate then.
It would indicate a much lower IFR, infection fatality rate, but it would also indicate a much bigger spread, right? So it's good news and bad news.
Right. And then also obviously hospitalizations are not going to be as bad either if a larger percent of the population already had it. Has there really ever been any other studies? I mean, that's one way of looking at it. If you're going to crawl into the sewers and get samples, has there been any other way? For example, what was the name of that cruise ship that had it? The Diamond Princess.
Yeah,
I believe
they,
that's one of the only times where they actually tested every single person and in a
there
controlled
has
study.
yeah
Go ahead.
there has been one. There's a couple of more where
Oh, okay.
they took some evacuees home to the United States and they tested everyone. And you have some numbers from I don't have those in my head, but you have some numbers there as well. They were actually they had more people getting ill than the Singapore study would suggest. But a cruise ship, what's the median age of a cruise ship?
Exactly. Yeah. There's going to be more old elderly people on there.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, it's at this point, and that's one thing you can note now in the when you look at the academic papers that are coming out, that the system of peer review now is non-existent. Everybody is producing what they can of papers at an enormous rate. So the influx of information now is, well, it's magnificent in one way, but it's also extremely hard to keep an overview over. You can no longer read every publication that comes because it flows like the river Rhine. So yeah, um, uh, it's possible to make qualified guesses, perhaps. I've seen one study suggesting that 5 out of 6 people have no symptoms,
Wow.
and that suggests you have to multiply the total confirmed by 5.
Yeah. And you think that's a good thing too? I mean, it could be good. Obviously, that means it's a much it's not as bad of a disease as we currently think it is. But at the same time, that means it's going to spread much easier.
It means more people have it, but it also means that it isn't as deadly as you would get the impression of, right? I can send you a table from an Italian study here that I found, and that kind of confirms those numbers.
Huh.
Um, it's an Italian study or a register study where they looked at the actual infection fatality ratio. That's not a measured number, that's actually a calculated number, but by age cohort. And infection fatality ratio in the 80 plus cohort is 9.3% in the Italian population.
9.3%. I'm sorry. What does that mean again?
9%, 9% of those 80 plus die from the infection.
Oh.
And that's not very deadly. The 80 plus cohort is, they're frail. And in the 20 to 29, you have an infection fatality ratio of 0.03. That's not bad odds if you're 25.
Yeah. Not if you're
Fi-
over 80.
No, and if you're 25, you have a 5% chance of requiring critical care. No, sorry, you don't have that. You have 1.2. If you're 25 in Italy, in the core of the outbreak in Bergamo, you have a 1.2% chance of requiring hospitalization. And if you're hospitalized, you then have a 5% chance of requiring critical care. That means ICU ventilator. And you have a 0.03% chance of dying.
Now,
That
as it starts to slow down a little bit in Italy, are we seeing these numbers change then? Because if the hospitals are not quite as overloaded as they were before, if there wasn't such rationing of care as before, are we starting to see the numbers drop?
I would not expect the numbers in 20 to 29-year-old cohort change through that because they would receive care anyways. Italy never got beyond the point where they had to do triage or had to not give ventilation support to anyone below the age of 60, around there, right? They had the cutoff there for a while that was 60. Anyone above 60 years of age wouldn't get an ICU bed, but they never went beyond that point. So it wouldn't change the numbers from 60 down to toddlers. That would pretty much remain constant, I would expect. That's just deducting. It's not because I've seen new numbers.
What about other factors though? Since, for example, EMS ambulance being able to go pick up these people and bring them to a hospital, or even having beds or space in hospitals, or having enough doctors or nurses to take care of these people.
Yeah, that would affect those that would normally not. If you're thinking about a hospital in a position where you no longer have enough supplies or staff, then that would first and foremost be a problem for those older than 80, older than 70, those with pre-existing conditions with a high, where you don't expect them to survive anyways, right? They would be the people who would not receive the care. The young people, the healthy people would get the same amount of care in a crisis or a catastrophic scenario as they do now, if you understand what I mean, because they are the ones triage in anyways. So yeah.
And I guess brings up something I've kind of been interested in is what is the progression of this virus? So the virus, to be clear, the virus name is that SARS CoV-2, and
Yeah.
then the actual illness it causes is called the COVID-19. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what
That's
is the
how I. Well, they changed name for it a couple of times. So
yeah
yeah,
they
let's
did.
just let's just stick with that, or just
All right,
call
COVID-19.
call it the virus. You know.
There we go.
Yeah.
Everyone knows which one we're talking about. We don't have to
Yeah.
delineate. What is the actual progression of it? So it seems like people get infected, and then there's a 4 or 5 day, from what I've read, 4 or 5 days, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter period of before they're going to start showing symptoms. Once they show symptoms, it seems like it's hangs in there for several days before it really flares up. Seems to be 5 or 6 more days before it gets really bad to the point where they require hospitalization. And then
Yeah.
from there, it'll eventually even get worse to the point where you die if you are going to die from it.
Mm. Um, I can give you another overview of that. Hold on. There are, I mean, that would be a median, right? The average of
Right.
every patient, because there are different cohorts responding differently to this. But what is interesting, or clinically interesting about it, is exactly what you saw in Boris Johnson,
Right.
where you get the flu-like symptoms, and they're not that bad, and they're, how do you say, moderate, and you get a little bit better, and then day 6, day 7, you suddenly take a turn for the worse. Um,
Oh, there we
and
go.
that's kind of where you have the problem. So if you look at those charts, you would see that these are um, blood, how do you say, laboratory results that are thought to be associated with survival or non-survival, and they're kind of things you don't want to see in a patient, right? Like what's called D-dimer. That means that your blood is coagulating when it shouldn't be, which is a bad sign. It's the top left one. If you look at that, you'll see it starts rising 7 days in levels. So nothing really happens until, say, day 7, if you look at that chart, right? And that's kind of what you saw in Johnson. Day 7, and then yeah, now I'm getting better. I'll be back to running the UK government, and then day 8, okay, he's in the ICU. So that seems to be the development of it, right? That's yeah.
So, and then what happened? So afterward, what are the courses of treatment then? What can they do for people as they get progressively worse? Because I read a study and they were talking about the ventilators, and they said the survival rate for somebody who has to go on a ventilator is somewhere between 50% to only 10%, only 10% at the highest study of people who are on a ventilator end up surviving from it.
Well, being on a ventilator is a bad thing, anyways. You it it it's not a good thing for a lung, and you might, I don't know if you saw that discussion on should we now be producing emergency ventilators.
Mm-hmm.
And well, yes and no, depends on what you can produce, because these are not just your average bag blowing air into people. It's a continuous overpressure thing, for instance, and continuous overpressure isn't very good for lungs. Neither is having a plastic tube. It produces infections, and it produces overpressure damage. So just being on a ventilator is high risk.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then you have to add to that, what is the virus actually doing? And I would not claim to know enough intensive care medicine to be able to subtract one from the other, if you see what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
Um, um, and I think it depends. It highly depends on your age, right? That's the your age and your pre-existing conditions is what determines outcome here in the majority of cases. you see people dying at a young age with no pre-existing conditions. I mean, people in perfect health, but that's not the norm. If you see
Right.
what I'm saying, that's the outliers. So I would expect more than 50%. At least we haven't seen that mortality rate here. That 50% of those on ventilators die. That sounds inflated compared to what I've seen or heard.
Hmm.
But I couldn't tell you for certain. I mean, it's possible. It depends on where how far into the scenario you are, I guess. Another thing I'm wondering about here is nobody's more exposed to this than the ICU staff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you see healthcare, especially ICU staff, becoming ill. So I wonder if that might actually have an impact on what we discussed earlier, the fatality rate, because then you lose the best anesthesiologists and the best nurses, those actually trained to operate these highly complicated wards, and that might actually increase the mortality rate.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, I know here in the U.S. they're having a lot of people who are either retired or they, were a nurse or different positions in the healthcare industry who left for another job and now they're coming back. They're trying to bring
Yeah,
back anyone who had any experience at all, pretty much to to try to help out. And
and
obviously, that's
crash
something that's going to get. Yeah, exactly.
and crash courses in intensive medicine for people who have been out of that for or never clean, what
Or
do you
did
say,
that, yeah. Or
yeah,
even
never done
students
that.
too.
Yeah,
They have students who are not graduated yet, but they're being sent out to start doing some of the jobs and learning, on the job.
yeah, which is a good idea, but I would rather be treated by a seasoned anesthesiologist than somebody who had a 2 weeks crash course in how to run a ventilator.
Oh yeah, but I'd rather be treated by somebody who only had a 2 week crash course than nobody at
Nobody.
all. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So the progression of the illness we're talking about, the days that go by, how does that compare with others like Ebola or different other outbreaks we've had in recent memory? Because it seems like this one's kind of slow, which seems like it could be a worse thing. Whereas Ebola, I guess that I don't know all the details about Ebola, but it seems like other illnesses happen real quick.
Yeah, and they would be progressive usually. You would usually see people getting worse day by day, and then at the end, if somebody dies from the flu, and that happens, still we are still not competing with the seasonal flu here, by the way. uh, the coronavirus is still in the ballpark of the if you go to the worldometer, you'll see the death toll of the seasonal flu, and it's not like it passed the seasonal flu. You often see them getting worse day by day. Day two is a little bit worse than day one, and day eight worse than day seven. That kind of that clear up period that we talked about, where you get a little bit better from the infection, and then suddenly you take a turn for the worse. That's actually highly interesting. To me, that's suggestive of hypersensitivity reactions. The immunodefense system going, well, renegade. Is how I interpret that, but that's my personal opinion. There have been some studies in that direction, but that's kind of the anomaly there. That it is has a two-phase manifestation.
So,
Mm.
have you looked at the people who have recovered? Because there's been some reports out, different people talking about people who do recover from this. They'll have long term issues with lungs,
Yeah,
potentially becoming sterile. What else was
you
there? Loss of sense of smell, things like that that become permanent or long term at least. We don't know if they're
yeah,
permanent yet.
you've seen scarring, lung scarring. You've seen yeah, kidney damage. You could imagine, you would expect scarring to the heart. There's been reports of brain tissue being affected by this.
Would part of that
Um,
have to do with the ventilator? You're talking about like the lung scarring, as you're talking about
well,
overpressure and things like that.
I talked to a pathologist some days ago and asked him exactly that question. Can you, when you do autopsies on these people, see the difference between the overvent or the overpressure ventilation damage when that's prolonged and disease? And he said, well, yes, I can. And you see both, right? You see, but he sees all the dead, and he saw the more virus damage, than the ventilator damage. So,
Mm.
but also pulmonary embolism, meaning blood clots. So it seems to have that autoimmune aspect to it, where it actually produces um, an immune response that is harmful in itself.
Have you seen any numbers or percentage of people who get this have continuing lung problems or other issues after they recover?
I have not, and it tends to be that when you've had a viral pneumonia, you tend to be obstructed for a while afterwards. It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon to prescribe anti-asthmatic medication for people who's gone through a severe virus pneumonia. So that would it in itself wouldn't be uh, that abnormal, but I think you'll have to wait and see if this in the survivors, if that corrects itself or not. Then you would have to talk to a pulmonologist, I guess, over the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. So, speaking of people who recover, one of the big questions has been if we are developing an immunity to it. And there have been now some reports that I believe it was 91 people last I checked in South Korea who have recovered, and I believe diag- to be to be stated that you have recovered, you have to test negative on two tests uh, over a 21, and then 24 hours later another one, and then you're
Correct.
considered recovered. But 91 people now so far have recovered in that sense, and then ended up testing positive again for it.
Yep. Which is bad news. There's I can see two ways of explaining that. One, that it has latency, like the herpes family, that it can lay there asymptomatic and then break out again. The other is that there is no immunity. And I
Hmm.
saw one study from Singapore where they did antibody titer, if that's correctly translated, but where you check for antibodies in those who have gone through the infection, and they found them to be surprisingly low, meaning they are hesitant, or how to say, it's hard to conclude that herd immunity or immunity would actually be a um, property. And of course, then you have a problem.
Oh yeah, because then we can just
Right so far isn't, how do you say, it doesn't, I don't mean to sound insensitive, but it's
right.
not impressive, right?
It's not Ebola or something with
It's not
70%.
it's not Ebola, right? It's competing with the seasonal flu. Now, I said last time that the worst case a very bad flu, and it's still not in terms of actual dead people, not a very bad flu, but but it will increase over the next weeks and months, of course. But that's still just a regular virus, and still a virus pneumonia, not that different from what we've seen before, right? Like 2009, the swine flu. We're still
Yeah.
in that ballpark. But if you see a virus that you don't develop immunity against, then you can. Then I'll admit that I was completely and horribly wrong the last time we spoke. Because that is something that you don't want to see.
It's yeah, it's kind of like I never liked the idea of people who predict the end of the world. Like all the time you see the people will say the world's going to end on what was it, December 21st, 2012, because of the Mayan calendar, and you have all these people claiming the world is going to end. I always wonder what the point of that is, because if you're right, well, no one's going to be around to pat yourself on the back and get the uh, attention for it. If you're wrong,
Yeah.
you can only be wrong. So at that point, you
Yeah.
almost don't want. It's not even worth being right over. You might as well be wrong and have everything go wrong anyway.
Well, it's like this. Being a pessimist is nice because eventually you will be right.
Yeah,
It's like you can have a tombstone with the text, finally, or I was right. I was right all along. I was going to die. There was hysteria in 2009 with the swine flu. There was hysteria when the Ebola outbreak hit last time. I mean, you always get that, and then it turns out, well, it wasn't that bad. The swine flu killed a lot of people, but it went away. And you asked me last time, how concerned are we supposed to be? Well, not more concerned than I would be about any other virus, because there was no data suggesting this is, well, you had the people saying, well, look at the Chinese, they're building massive hospitals, but at the same time they said the Chinese are always lying. So I mean, yeah, what data did you have there, right? And the first articles coming out of China, the first one in Lancet was, yeah, okay, this is maybe a stronger coronavirus than the rest of its family. And we're still there that it's a viral pneumonia with some, in some few instances, doing other things in the human body, but it's still, in the terms of deaths, not that, yeah, like you said, it's not Ebola, right? It's a bad flu, or a flu, or compared, you can still compare it to the flu. But I mean, if there's no immunity here, or even worse, if those dying are dying from hyperimmunity, meaning the next time they get it, the immune defense system will respond even more. Then you're looking at the possibility of a second and a third wave.
Yeah,
And that's data that are being starting to come now, right? Like you said, with cases from South Korea and the study from Singapore, you're starting to see, okay, we're doubting the immunity, or the ability of the human body to produce immunity against this. That kind of makes vaccine something that you can no longer hope for, because vaccines base themselves on triggering the human immunity system, right?
true.
So then you have a problem. Then you can, okay, then you get to say this is worse than what we've seen before.
So,
Is
so
it?
when I want to ask
Okay.
a question real quick, just when you talk about that second round, is that because, from what I hear, is that because of the cytokine storm that happens when it gets real bad?
Yeah, it seemed that the cytokine storm would be a hypersensitivity reaction. It wouldn't be the properties of the virus itself producing that, but it would be an immune defense system overreacting. Now, why it's, and that's lethal. That's what some of these people are. If you look at that last the lab result overview that I sent you, you would see that IL-6 is interleukin 6 is one of those things that predict survival or non-survival. It's the left row in the middle, and that is part of such a cytokine storm. It tells you something about the level of immune response, and in those dying you see it going exponentially upwards. So there is, in especially in the young dying from this, it seems to be autoimmune. It seems to be the immune defense system overreacting.
Interesting. Do you think there is a chance that so when we're talking about these 91 people in South Korea, do you think there's a chance that some of these people might have had maybe weaker immune systems, or there's a reason why they did not develop an immunity? Could it be possibly that these people, like I said, just had compromised systems, so they didn't develop enough antibodies against it, and that's not the case in everyone?
Yeah, it could be that it's a tiny fraction of the population who are unable to produce immunity against this virus, and the rest of us are. That would be good news,
That would be,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, and that's still not, that's pending, right? That's where we are right now. uh,
Yeah. And that's been the
uh
biggest problem with this whole thing is it's just a lack of information, right? We just
yeah,
haven't had enough time to study and know everything.
yeah. So okay, if it's, I saw one of those cases as a medical student in an autopsy, a person in the early teens dying from a coronavirus, damage to the heart. So those classes of viruses has, in 1 per 100,000, or what do I know, 1 per 10,000 something. They had that ability that many years ago. But if now you're seeing a global spread, you probably to a population density, what do I know, uh, and then it kind of becomes a problem. And the question is the virus doing this in more of its hosts, or is it just that now everybody's getting it because it spread so fast? I don't know. I don't think anybody does, right? But that's the reason for concern is exactly there at the immunity part of the deal, because if you don't have herd immunity here, then it's a bad one.
Yeah. What about I've heard other people say that it could be faulty tests, and that actually brings up a bigger point. I've been uh, amazed to find out is the most of these tests are only 80% accurate from what I've read.
When
So
you're
so
talking
why
about
oh,
when you're talking about accuracy of tests, you need to talk about the sensitivity and the specificity, because those things are separate in that kind of testing. Meaning, what's the probability of getting a false positive, and what's the probability of getting a false negative, right? Because they are not how do you say, they're not necessarily linked in any way. So the accuracy is also, you can get more positives than you actually had, but it's also that you can get more negatives than you actually have, if you see what I mean.
yeah,
And both things have been reported here, because tests are being produced at a high rate, and they're not always quality checked as one
right.
would
When
would
you have to
hope.
mass produce anything, you're gonna have defects. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard reports of different batches showing different quality.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to rush and get as many made as possible as quickly as possible,
Yeah,
like we are right
and
now.
and if 5 of 6 people, think about this, if 5 of 6 people are asymptomatic, and health workers are at an higher risk than everybody else of getting it, they would contaminate the tests, wouldn't they?
Huh.
Because if you're the one doing the testing, the probability that you contaminate the test that you're doing is significant. But you could be positive about knowing it yourself as you're a health worker, and 5 out of 6 are asymptomatic, right? So there's another problem.
Do we find so going back to the part you mentioned about possibly not developing an immunity to it? So do they find then, say that was the case, you don't develop an immunity to it with other viruses and other things, from the last time you had it and the next time you have it, it's worse and progressively worse each time?
I would not know that. I don't. I'm not aware of any disease behaving like that, but I'm on very thin ice, I feel.
Right, fair enough.
What I can tell you is that immunity against the coronavirus family, the colds, isn't very common. That's why you can get them every year, if you see what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
It's because you don't develop that immunity to that extent. And it's why you don't have a vaccine against it, but you do against the flu, right? Because it changes, it mutates the corona family. The other thing to perhaps, which might be relevant to that question, is the fact that if you're allergic to bee stings, you don't die at the first bee sting, you die at the second,
Huh.
because the first bee sting mobilizes it learns your immune defense system to recognize the poison, and the next time you're stung, then it overreacts. And well, I don't know enough immunology to tell you if a virus can do that or not.
Right. Because it would just be interesting if we never develop any immunity to it. Say the 5 out of 6 people who are asymptomatic and the 99% of people who just don't die in general or have mild symptoms in general. If they will just continue to have that and there's really nothing to worry about
Yeah,
continuing getting it because you have no symptoms, right? Like, so you don't even know you have it. Or if over time it's going to weaken your body.
yeah,
That'd be
or get
interesting.
worse. And they say that the Spanish flu was worse the second time around,
Exactly. Yeah.
and you could see that, but that would be speculations again. Then you're joining the ranks of those people calling out the end of the world at every corner. You would need the data to do more than guessing. But that's what we're finding out. I guess that's what we will be looking for now, is how does immunity behave, and what are the cases like in those people who get it for the second time.
Yeah, because it's interesting. They're pouring a lot of, at least I know in the U.S. I believe they're doing it in Chicago. They're doing it in New York, and I believe they're starting it in Texas. Here is doing antibody tests to see who has already had the disease, and they're talking about that in reference to being able to open up the economy again. So if you already had it and you had the antibody test positive, you can go back to work.
And that could be hope now, right?
Yeah.
That could be hope, not actual data. Could you just give me 1 minute and I'll be back?
Sure. Yep. Eric, how you doing? You got all your tabs pulled up?
Yeah,
I know
man. I've got like
you got
1,000 things
tons of
open.
stuff.
So much stuff open. But I'm flipping through the 1.3 Acres website if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, this site is awesome. This is pretty much the only site. Now this is only for the U.S. and to a lesser extent Canada, but definitely go on this site. It's the number one, and then POINT, the number 3 acres, ACRES.com. They have so much data here. It's incredible. So like where you are, obviously it's got all these graphs, the fatality rate, the number of cases, how many cases there are each day, the demographics, how many people have died. But then if you scroll down a little bit, Eric, if you go down to the, I'm sorry, I'm looking at you 10 seconds ago, so it'll be
Oh, you're good.
difficult.
Go ahead.
But if you go down to the map of the United States, you can click on any state. So you can click on, any state you want, and then you can look at any county you want. So not only do they have the whole country's data and the whole state data, but you can look at the data for every county.
Oh, geez. Look how many counties there is in Texas. Oh, God.
The interesting thing about Texas there is like half of them don't even have any cases. Maybe not quite half anymore. But there's a lot of there's a lot of counties that don't have any confirmed cases yet.
Yeah, there's one or two, three, four. Yeah, like almost the bottom. Like I would say the bottom, but like the lower quarter of them are under 7. They're growing
a lot
pretty
of
quick.
counties in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got Houston, Dallas, and then outside of Houston, I guess they say non-Houston Harris County. I don't know what that means. And then Tarrant, Travis. Yeah, so Tarrant County being Fort Worth, Arlington, where the Cowboy Stadium is, and all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's getting there.
Yeah, I don't know why they break up Harris County into 2. I've been looking at that. I know this doesn't apply to anyone but Eric and I right now.
Yeah, or anybody listening in Texas, but. We got a lot of. We actually have a lot of people that live in Texas that listen to us. By the way, just saying, just saying.
Well, then it applies to one more person.
There you go.
but yeah, because Dallas County is more than just the city of Dallas. It's the suburbs as well.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas it seems like that's what they're delineating between Harris County, Houston, and Harris County, not
right.
Houston. Anyway, it's a great site though. They have a lot of data.
You guys who know Texas, is the spread in Texas reflective of the population density?
Yeah, that's what it seems like. It seems like if we go back, I'm gonna go back to the counties.
Some extent, yes.
If you go
Houston is larger and they have more than Dallas.
Yeah,
more than Dallas.
So let's look at the top counties, right? So you have Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, basically top 3, right? And then you have Denton, which is a bigger town. You have Galveston, El Paso, Lubbock. Like these are all bigger towns in Texas. If you look, and we're going off counties, right? So it's kind of hard to tell because there's multiple cities inside the county, but these are the bigger ones right here. Travis County. I mean, these are all the big areas.
Cities,
yeah. Collin County, El Paso. This is all Lubbock, Montgomery. This is all this is Hidalgo. This is all like either the bigger cities or like right around the bigger cities.
Well, the interesting thing to me too, kind of talking a little bit what you mentioned there, Doc, was population density and number of cases. Now, Eric, if you flip back to the whole map of the U.S. and you can click on cases per million, and it's not exactly, but it seems like many more northern states have more cases per population density per million than southern states. Minus if you don't count Louisiana, because I believe they said Louisiana got hit real bad because of Mardi Gras. They didn't cancel Mardi Gras. Everyone was out partying, and it spread real
Right.
Yeah.
quick there.
That's a super spreader for you, Mardi Gras. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can look
Yep.
at Louisiana on the map, and it is dark red. And then you look at
Yep.
New York and New Jersey, probably just because New York City is so densely populated. I mean, there's just no way to get away from it at that point unless you're going to evacuate. You know, where
Yeah.
do you evacuate all these people? Millions of people. Where do you put them? You know, they're not going
But even
anywhere.
even places like Michigan or Pennsylvania and other states like that have been hit pretty bad. Do we have any information, Doc, on the effects of temperature or climate or humidity on the reproductive rate of this virus?
Well, not of the reproductive rate because that's inside your body. So that would be the same temperature and density generally throughout the human population. I hope, but survival rate on surfaces seems to fluctuate with, of course, temperature and humidity. I found a great overview for anyone wanting to protect themselves against this. Hold on, here it is. There's that shows this, this we can't talk about survival because a virus per definition isn't alive, it's just a molecule, so
Huh.
it's per definition dead. But if we call it, it's called denaturation time, or active or inactive virus when it's so-called dead. But if we call it dead, just for the simplicity of it,
Right.
it shows these figures shows the survival rate on different surfaces
Oh, great.
compared to SARS-1, because you have to compare to something, right? And that's kind of useful information if you want to decontaminate your, I don't know, groceries or grandmother. But a specific study on temperature and humidity, I actually haven't seen. It's probably out there. So I'm guessing if you put that into Google Scholar, you would find it. Somebody has probably done that now. I haven't seen it, but every other virus is dependent on humidity and temperature. So, and we talked about that last time as well. That I said
Right.
something about expecting the effective R, the reproduction rate, to go down as we approach summer. And I think we'll see that because UV radiation from the sun and warmer temperatures should produce less active virus in the environment. Now it's spreading in Africa, right? So that kind of contradicts what I just said, and it spreads in South America, and it spreads in Iran, which is, well, I don't know how hot Iran is in March. It might be cold for all I know. Never been there in March, but we will be getting those answers as we see how it spreads through Africa.
Yeah.
I don't expect to see that many confirmed cases there because then they would have to do the testing. But I think the death reports will be adequate. So then we get to see, in real life, how does it behave in the heat? How does it behave in the desert? How does it behave in the bush?
That's been cool. That's the thing. I remember reading a month ago they were talking about how almost all the cases, like 90%, 95% of the cases, are between these two latitudes. But obviously, in more southern
Yeah.
latitudes, those countries do not have the same healthcare industry and testing ability and all that stuff too. So that could all mean nothing.
Right, but the deaths would be registered, right? Somebody's dead.
Hopefully, yeah.
That's just it's easy to register, and I would expect them to register that. And I mean, in the case of Africa, they would, right, because they would be needing help if it gets out of hand for them. So they would be it would be very much in their interest to report the deaths accurate, or at least not lower than the actual death number. So, and the deaths would be trailing 2 weeks behind the infection.
Yeah, but couldn't
Yeah.
it also though be thrown off because just the fact that not very many people travel to Nigeria compared to people traveling to New York City? So
Yeah, but
it's going
it's
to be lagging
already in
behind.
Nigeria. Nigeria is reporting
Oh,
305
true.
confirmed
Yeah.
cases, right? So it's already there, and it's probably spreading there, right? So, and if we speak again 2 weeks from now, and Nigeria has 600 confirmed cases, that means that heat is affecting it a lot. So then you get to sit at home and actually, measure that yourself.
So do you think it kind of goes back to, we already talked about it a little bit. Do you think death is if you look at how many deaths there are and the changes in numbers of death, might give you a better accurate idea of how much it's spreading, although 2 weeks late?
Yeah, I would think that deaths on ICU would be the best way to actually see the spread of this. I would not to a great extent trust the total confirmed numbers. But you had the point earlier there. I think the ICU, the capacity or the reported number of ICU patients actually would comprise the most reliable numbers, because deaths would be contaminated, right? And the confirmed numbers would also be contaminated by bad tests, or the things we
Lack
talked
of
about.
testing or anything.
Yeah, and lack of testing, and there's a million factors influencing the number of total confirmed cases. But the ICU cases would actually reflect the true disease load of the virus. That's actually a very good point.
I guess I kind of already asked that question earlier. Eric, I sent you a link on Zencaster there, if you want to pull that up. We were talking about, oops, close that. We were talking about humidity and temperature. So I was reading that higher levels of humidity actually lessen the spread of it, or lessen the chances of spread, or however you want to define that, because there's more water in the air. The water droplets are heavier, therefore they tend to fall down and not linger in the air as much. I found this video here. All right, if you're pulling that up, Eric.
Yeah, sorry
Of,
if it plays a bunch of sound and around you. I don't know where
So
the
how
oh,
does
yeah.
this take?
And I'm watching the stream, so
I
it's
don't
10
know where
seconds
the
behind.
volume is. How do you turn the volume down on this thing? Oh, there it is. This thing.
Yep.
Okay.
This is a pretty crazy one. I think I sent this to you, Doc. If not, you might just have to watch it. So they did a controlled study of showing someone sneezing and how long those droplets are just suspended in the air. And it's pretty scary.
Yep. That's in that table I sent you as well. Aerosols, how long they linger, and it's horrible.
It is, because you think, like, if you see someone sneeze, you're gonna see the big drops, right? You're gonna see and you see that fall right to the ground. But it's the small ones you cannot see that linger there for hours. Even.
Oh God. We're just showing this guy sneezing on our show. I didn't think I'd be doing this, but here we go. I thought we were going to be sticking to military stuff, but hey, you know what? You got to step outside your bounds sometimes, you know? Oh, geez. That is disgusting.
And it just hangs out there forever, yeah. So is that true then? The humidity tends to make all these droplets fall down and lessen the amount of time it's airborne?
Yeah,
you know anything
I
about that?
guess so. If you're sneezing in the rain, there's no way it can linger, is there? It's why the fire department hoses down the smoke, so it would make sense.
And that's the other thing about this is that, you know, you can't see
Watching this guy sneeze.
you can't see microscopic stuff in the air. I mean, you can see it a little bit right here, but you know, in a lot of this video, it's not. You can't record microscopic stuff from 3 feet away. You know, you'd have to. That's why scientists have, you know, petri dishes and stuff like that. They have stuff that they can look at really closely. You know, you can't just record it with a camera, some kind of infrared camera. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of gross to see it floating around in the air like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's
Yeah,
scary to
Kinda
think about.
want-
I mean,
You kind of want to stay indoors now, don't you?
yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like even when I take my dog out for a walk, nobody's out there. But if somebody had walked by 2 hours earlier, like 2 hours earlier, and they sneezed or coughed or something, then I could potentially get it from that. It's
Well,
kinda weird to think
Win is your friend here. You know, it's like around. So if you have a surgical department that is well developed, The patient being operated on would be behind an air curtain, meaning if you sneeze directly at the patient on the table, it might not reach the patient because there's a downflow of air around the patient being
Uh,
sucked out through the floor and blown out through the ceiling. That would be a state of the art operating theater, right? And you can use the air curtain phenomenon to your advantage if you want to be social, because if you're standing next to someone in a headwind, they would have to calculate the trajectory and sneeze into the wind at the proper angle to hit you.
you have to pull out a
If you see what
protractor
I
and
mean.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can use the wind as an air curtain here if you want, if you're going insane from solitude.
That makes sense. Then the only thing that makes me worried is I'm right next to a hospital. I live near a major hospital.
Downwind.
Downwind, yes. Well, they said the wind normally comes from the west, right? At least in the U.S. here, it comes from the west to the east, and the hospital is west of me. So hopefully, no
Oh,
one's
good.
sneezing over there.
They should be circulating their air in a proper manner. It should
I'm
be
sure they are. Yeah,
sterile as it comes out.
hopefully, yeah.
But yeah, that the wind will kind of carry it away for you. You know, it's also about concentration. You know, getting one virus into your airways won't kill you. Probably won't make you sick at all, right? It's a matter of numbers. That has been shown. I can't quote it for you, but it has been shown that the amount of virus that you're actually contaminated with is in some manner connected to how ill you become.
Interesting. And also, is there any numbers or anything you know about, or even to take an example from other viruses, where people tend to get infected with it through different methods more often? For example, airborne. For example, is it less likely to get enough of it or to inhale it versus compared to touching a surface that was infected with it and then touching your face? Is it
Well,
more
we
likely
talked.
to spread that way?
Yeah, we talked about that last time. You know, the don't touch yourself thing. It's still valid. The
Yeah.
contact contamination is the one big thing here, as shown by those figures. You know, the half life on surfaces. Uh, m- Probably much more important than the actual sneezing into air part of it. Though they say that if you spend more than 15 minutes closer than, or 1 meter or closer or something, you will have to regard yourself as at great risk.
Huh.
So there is an um, there is part of this, of course, being the aerosols, but I would be how do you say, I would be surprised if the main portion of this R isn't uh, through surfaces, contact contamination. Kind of shown by the Norwegian government, who introduced, you know, hand sanitizer and routines for not shaking hands and, you know, staying a little bit away from each other. Nothing more than that, and people staying, you know, not going to work, made actually the effective R drop below 1, down to 0.8 or something.
Hmm.
So that's not eliminating people walking past you on the street, but it's eliminating the possibility of contracting it by, you know, shaking hands and hugging people.
Hmm. And then Eric, I have another topic to jump to, but before we do that, do you have any questions on this general topic
Yes.
you want to bring up?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask a few questions from the chat room. So one of the things that, and another thing that I'm really interested in is, what do you think the odds are of us eradicating other things like the cold, or not necessarily eradicating, but really ramping them down, like the flu that we get every year, you know, or the cold that we get every year that just seems to evolve really well. We've just always dealt with it, right? So what happens when, you know, we finally pull back because of this, which we think is going to kill us, because we've never really cared about the flu or the cold. But now that we think, you know, there's a good chance that this may kill us, we pull back. What are the odds that this may knock out something that we didn't think was possible?
Oh, that's already been reported that the seasonal flu is dying out at a fast rate. If that was your question, you know, it kind of it has eradicated other seasonal diseases because of the social distancing.
That's a good thing, right? That's one benefit.
Yeah, and it makes the death numbers purer if you can make that morbid argument. You know that when the seasonal flu dies out, and well, everybody dying of a virus now is dying of this.
Right, definitely. One of the other questions is, especially when it comes to the military, is a lot of the military, especially if they're out on mission, they're very isolated. So they're even if you're on the ground or you're on a submarine or you're on a ship or you're on an aircraft, you're generally pretty isolated, especially at some point, right? Where you are in a very very close contact space with a bunch of people, and obviously, you could see the military shifting where they're wearing masks, and they're trying to mitigate the spread as much as possible. But generally, there's not much you can do, right? You're going to have somebody in a silo. You're going to have somebody on a submarine. You're going to have somebody on a carrier. You're going to have, and we've seen spreads now at this point where they've actually removed large military assets from the game because that asset, like the Theodore Roosevelt, is full of people that are infected, right? I'm just showing a little graphic right here of New York Post where they're saying 447 people. That's a lot of people on a carrier, right? That's 10% of the carrier is now infected, so you can't really use that thing anymore, right? I feel like a lot of the the military is in a really close spot. So they'll go out into the public, they'll interact, they'll go back to their families, but they're always going to go back to this one very specific spot with a bunch of other people. It seems like, you know, you know, to me, it seems like those could be super spreader spots, right? You could put somebody like on the carrier. Now you got 400 people on that one carrier. You put this person on a cruise ship. Now you got the whole cruise ship that's lit up. You got, this submarine like the Oscar 2 that I'll pull up in just a second. While you're talking, I'll show it. That's got infected, right? So now you have these pockets of people that become super spreaders because they're national defense. They're military. You cannot if you want to talk about essential, most people would assume those are the top of the top, right? So how you know what advice would you give to those people, and do you think that there's anything better they could do that could help them in these little tight spots?
Yeah, as for the military personnel, you mean?
Yeah.
Um, well, first to confirm what you're saying, there's two places. I was a military doctor for some years, and I saw infections that you usually don't see in the 20-year-old, if you know what I mean, because they're living so close together as they are in a military service. You do get, it's like there's two places you see meningitis in a 22-year-old. It's in the armed forces and during spring break, right? That's the two places where those bacteria might spread. So it's a valid point. It's a possible super spread location. Now I would expect any military doctor worth his buck to um, spend a lot of time instructing the personnel on how to protect themselves. I would, if it's crucial to the defense of a country, my advice would have been, I think, to lock it down, to not have people going, to local pubs and then back to base. That would be, not the best of ideas. But four people living in one room will spread it. You can't you can't have the same living space and don't contaminate each other. People eating together will probably infect each other, right? So then you would have to um, distance them. I mean, produce different zones, or it becomes a question of military logistics. But for the individual in service, I would expect the doctors there to give them a thorough introduction to how to protect yourself against this if they don't already know that, right? So that's the main thing I would say that they would have to do. But as with the carrier, when it's aboard a naval ship, it's kind of hard to stop it. Now, with that said, most of these people are more healthy and stronger than the regular population, and they're typically in their, 20s, maybe 30s. And the rate, how do you say, the symptomatic rate among 20 and 30 years olds are still in the 1 and 2%, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, it always felt to me that they were probably going to be better off regardless because they're in their health is the best that you could get at this point, right? I mean, they have to stay off drugs. I mean, I'm not saying that every single person on that ship is not on drugs, right? I'm sure there's a few people that slip through, right? But there's a lot of people that are kept off drugs. They generally can't drink a whole bunch because they have to work a lot, right? There's a lot to it. Those people are kind of forced into having healthier lives. I'm not saying that everybody in the military is healthy because I have met a guy who could not go on a ship because he was too big, right? I mean, I've seen it. So, I feel like you can't really use the military as a good, I mean, obviously they have a very tight demographic when it comes to age usually, but,
Yeah.
when it comes to just generally looking at the military as a, are they going to get, infected? Yeah. But are they going to get seriously hurt? Probably not, right? I actually knew a guy when I was in nuke school that had really bad pneumonia. He had pneumonia like 12 times growing up, and he actually got pneumonia while we were at nuke school. And I feel bad because he was a carrier nuke. I don't know if he's still on there. I don't know what the guy's doing anymore. He could be on that boat right now, as a Master Chief nuke, just kind of running stuff, and he could get affected from it. So I don't know. There's I have an article right here of one of the crew members. Let me pull it up. Oh my god, there's so much stuff. I'll have to pick through it. I'm sorry, but I have an article here. I'll pick through as you guys are talking that shows one of the crew members from the Theodore Roosevelt passed out, and they had to pull him out of his room. So, it's pretty rough for the military, especially because they have that one mission you can't stop. It's kind of like care workers. Like we need them. We need them more than anybody at this point. They can't stop what they're doing. So they're going to have a higher infection rate, right? Just like the military, I feel like the military is going to get this really crazy high infection rate because of what they have to do. Like we cannot stop them from doing this, right? So,
And they're tightly quartered. They eat together, and sometimes sleep in the same room. It's tightly quartered, and then you can't really stop it. Same showers, same bathrooms.
Yeah,
That's
especially
hopeless.
especially when
will
it comes
spread.
to like boot camp and stuff. When I went to boot camp, I got so sick. We all got sick. They call it the crew the crude or the something. I guess everybody's got their own name for it. But generally, like 3 weeks in, everybody's sick. Everybody's got something that's passing through everybody, and we're just all out. And I was out for 2 days. I couldn't do anything. I was just so miserably sick, laying in this sanitized room by myself. It was miserable, and I feel for those guys because if you're underway, there's nobody that's going to take care of you. You're going to lay there miserable. Like there's no wife, there's nobody that's gonna do anything for you. I hate to say it. I mean, unless you're in like miserable shape and you cannot literally get out of your bed, nobody's gonna come help you. Like I feel so bad for those guys. I'm sure they are hurting miserably. And I mean, what do you do? I mean,
So no farewell to arms, no beautiful Italian nurses.
no, I don't think
looking
so.
after you.
Yeah, we sent our two big hospital ships up to the main towns, and other than that, you're just gonna have to deal with it. I mean, I don't know what I haven't seen a lot of how they're responding, especially to like the Theodore Roosevelt, which has probably got the worst case at this point, right? I haven't seen much about how they're responding to it and what. I mean, we sent our hospital ship to L.A., so they have Guam trying to help this entire carrier at this point, and we've seen pictures of and they've talked about how they basically removed the crew, not the crew, but they've kind of left a skeleton crew on the carrier, and they've moved everybody onto hotel rooms, in Guam, and so everybody's separated, and so basically the cooks will walk around and deliver food to the front of the door and then walk away, and then everybody comes out at the same time and they all feed themselves. They all grab up their food and they go back inside, and it's just it. But that cook could be infected, and now everybody in that hotel room is infected, right? It's cross contamination. It's like one of the things that they taught us in nuclear power school was it's just a dot. That little dot on your finger could be powerful enough to kill a lot of people. And if you touch that and you touch that and you touch that, now it's just spreading everywhere, right? And now and that's what's really scary. I was talking to my boss who actually grew up in around Russia when everything got bad, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and he was like, we were afraid of guns. You could see it. Right? You could see the guns. You could see people coming at you. So you knew what was coming. You don't know it anymore. You've already got it. It's already over with. It's like, imagine somebody standing next to you with a gun next to your head for a week and you don't even see them. It's over, So it's pretty traumatic to a lot of people, especially the people that are in really tight spaces. And that's one of the things I really wanted to bring up with our podcast being, very heavily military and stuff. So,
we can stay in military medicine for a while, because it is relevant. How will this affect the combat readiness of a military in which this spreads? Well, medical selection is supposed to select the most healthy individuals, right? It's supposed to be, like you said. I'm a little bit surprised that the guy was allowed to go through with 14 pneumonias up until the point where he enlisted. That should have been checked out, actually. If somebody in selection medicine, if a recruit comes and tells you that, you ask them routinely, have you ever been to hospital? Yeah, 14 times for pneumonia. Okay, we would want to check that out first, right? So you would select for health, when you select military personnel. And if you look at the numbers from Italy, then for the 20 to 29-year-olds, you have a requiring hospitalization rate of 1.2%, meaning 98.8 is able to stay at home, meaning not that sick. And that's in a civilian population, and you would expect that to be a little bit even lower in a military population, right? And then you have a 0.03% chance of death. Which means that, hold on, you would have to have 10,000 people to actually see it, if you see what I'm saying. And that's the civilian numbers. I'd expect mortality to be lower in the among military personnel. So I'm not thinking that it's unpleasant, and as you said, your heart goes out to them, right? Because it's a horrible situation to be in, but it won't affect, I think, the combat readiness that much. Not at this point, anyway.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And then the last question I have that was on the chat room was how it's affecting the South China Sea, and I think that really depends, right? I think the overall main question being, how does it affect the military in the sense of how can you use this to your advantage, right? So we know that. So I'm just going to kind of flip through some of the articles. I pulled up a few of them, right? So we know that so we have a French carrier that's out, right? So we got 50 cases. This was yesterday from the Naval Institute. We got 50 COVID-19 cases on the carrier Charles de Gaulle, right, which is their main carrier. We have a Oscar II nuclear submarine that was pulled out of commission a couple of weeks ago. Could probably be back in. Who knows? Got a Dutch submarine that was pulled off mission because they got an alert, the Dolphin from the Dutch submarine, so they had to get pulled off mission. And then we have I pulled this up. So this is an article from the Naval Institute of China using their Coast Guard to push their agenda in the South China Sea. And what ended up happening was one of their Coast Guard ships rammed a Vietnamese fishing vessel. And you know, there, if you look through here, like all the stuff I'm showing you, it doesn't say anything about like, is China using this to their advantage? But that seems to be the rumor is, oh, well, you know, everybody's distracted by this virus. Everybody's afraid of this virus. Everybody's going to have to pull in, especially navally, right? Navally, I don't know if that's a word, but naval wise, they have to pull in, right? They, and if they don't, you know, they're, I don't want to say they're assholes, but they're not treating their public correctly because they should probably pull in and quarantine everybody and, you know, stop the virus from spreading. But if they don't, now they're out there warmongering, right? And so you kind of see this with, and I'm not saying that China did this. I don't know a lot of the details with this yet. I'm still trying to learn what happened with this incident, but there's a picture and there's video evidence of this Chinese Coast Guard vessel running into a Vietnamese ship, and everybody's like, well, everybody's distracted. Nobody could defend this ship, right? Nobody could defend this little boat because everybody's distracted with the coronavirus and stuff. And it seems like in this incident, this was probably going to happen regardless, right? I don't think that this virus had anything to do with anything. I'm pretty sure that regardless of what was going on, they were going to run into this thing and they were going to take it out regardless. I think there's a lot of aspects. Now, am I saying
that's been going on for a while too? Yeah.
Right. And now am I saying that it's not going to change how we react militarily? I think everybody's changing. I think everybody's completely reacted at this point, and nobody knows what's going on. And you're seeing this huge shuffle of, you know, what do we do? Like, nobody really knows what to do. Like, one of the things is, should we let the public know that this carrier is full of people that are infected? Or should we follow, you know, operational security or OPSEC and say, we can't say anything that's going on. You know, we don't know, right? Because people are going to get scared. Well, why are you saying that there's nobody here? You know, like the Nimitz, for example. People were kind of worried about the Nimitz, but now you find out nobody's infected, right? But, you know, if they said, we can't say anything because they're not infected, but we can't say anything because they are infected. Now everybody gets really confused and they get really scared and they start blaming the government. You know, you see how people kind of spiral out of control when it comes to that stuff. So it's like, but do you say we now have a carrier out of commission? That is a huge, huge, huge deal when it comes to national security, especially for the United States. We project our power. You know, we don't have a coastal defense. We push out, right? I mean, obviously we could bring everybody out here. You know, now they're not here defending us and they can't get over here. Obviously, if we get attacked, they're going to say, fuck it, we're just going to come anyways. But, you know, it places the chess pieces in certain places. Now everybody knows where it's at, right? Most people don't know what's going to go on, but we know for a fact that Theodore Roosevelt's going to be there for the next couple of days, right? For sure. For sure. So if your mission in that area is to do something in that area, now you know, oh, there's a carrier out. Screw it. And I'm sure the surrounding ships there's a few of them that are probably out. I'm sure there's a few destroyers. I'm sure there's a few, missile frigates and stuff like that are out too. Whatever. So now we can change our game, right? And I feel like it is going to affect stuff, and it is going to make a lot of change, but it's going to be very brief. And everybody's going to come back real quick. Everybody's going to be healed up. Everybody's going to be feeling better. And now you're going to see everybody shift really quickly. It's going to be like the stock market. It's going to go down. I feel like it's going to go down and go back up. And it's going to shift really quick. I don't know. But that's just my feeling anyways. I'm just kind of ranting a little bit at this point. But other than that was all the questions I had from YouTube on this point. So if you want to shift subjects, feel free.
Well, there's
yeah.
actually two good
Well,
questions
that brings up a good question, but I'm
One
going to
is,
save that for the
if
end.
five
That brings
out
up a
of
really
six
good
are
question, though.
asymptomatic, why does it take out the carrier?
But the one other thing that we
That
talked
seems
about,
strange,
Doc,
right? That
before
it's
we started
out
was, and
of
we mentioned
service.
this last time in February,
The other one is
the possibility of this coming from a Chinese lab.
tiger when
Now, that's been a
he's,
conspiracy theory that's
injured
going
is
around.
at his most dangerous.
At first, it was more
Superpowers
discussing
feeling that they're not able to,
the more
you know,
fringe
hold the
conspiracy
guard up.
theory aspect of it
Might
being
be
a
more
bioweapon developed by the
paranoid than usual.
Chinese. And we kind of all agreed that didn't make any sense. It's almost certainly not the case. But Eric, I pulled up another article. I believe I sent it to you earlier, but I posted it again in that Zencaster chat.
Hey, Greg, I think you
now-
actually, I think you dropped from our Zencaster.
I'm out of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you dropped again. Can you hear me, Doc?
I hear you.
Oh,
can
Doc
you-
might have been the one to drop out.
No, me and Doc are here, but you're gone. So you mind
Well, I can-
you mind dropping out of
I
our
can hear
Zencaster
you.
and come back?
Yeah, hold on. Copy.
Sorry, Doc. I'm not sure who came through on that feed because you guys were both talking at the same time.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Nope, still can't hear you.
No.
Yeah, your mic is not coming through on Zencaster. Yeah, you're getting a bunch of warnings. Greg's
says
actually
on
got
his
it.
name.
I'm not sure if you guys can hear Greg, but he's actually got his name on Zencaster as Gerg. So if you see him next time, make sure you call him Gerg. I think he's
Now
having
can you?
I think he's having some microphone issues. No, we still can't hear you on Zencaster.
How are you responding to me then?
I have no idea, but you're not coming through on here.
So they can't hear me on the thing.
I have no idea. I have so many windows open stuff. I don't know. Nah.
So you can
it's
hear
a
me, but they
health
can't hear me on the
check
podcast.
failed. Maybe
No,
it's the
Doc can't hear
virus.
you.
Oh, I can't hear.
Yeah,
Doc
we can hear you on the podcast. We hear you talking. But Doc can't hear you.
Oh man. Do you think it might be a problem with Doc? 'Cause I can hear you fine.
Nope, I think it's
I don't
you.
know what else to do.
I think you
Health
suck.
check, but warning. All right. Well, do you want to bring up this issue with the conspiracy theory, that article I sent you?
Yeah, definitely. So let me pull up this article real quick. Which one was it?
The National
Review?
Review.
All right.
And also, yeah, I mean, mention it's a political site.
So
It looks like it. Someone sent it to me, so I don't know if it's reputable and all that. But I think it's interesting to talk about the possibility that this might have accidentally come out from them studying a natural disease, not one made in a laboratory.
right. So National
And
Review.
I'll try to play around with this again.
Right. So National Review talking about the trail leading back to the Wuhan labs. So yeah, Greg sent me this this article about it. So if you want to talk about it a little bit, I think they can hear you. I'm sorry if he's dropping in and out. I'm not sure what's going on with his microphone or anything, but he's got this article he sent me about the trail leading back to the Wuhan labs. No proof that the coronavirus was actually escaped from a laboratory. Right. I think a lot of people were assuming that they talk about. Maybe this is escaped from some kind of lab where they were manufacturing it, some kind of bioweapon, right? So let me see if Greg's back real quick.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. I think we can hear you now. You hear him, Doc?
Loud and
Okay,
clear,
great.
sir.
Yeah, so this one is
There we
not
go.
necessarily that it was a bioweapon, but this one seems like it could be, at least on the surface, more believable that it could have came from a Chinese lab who was studying this virus already. They were already studying this virus. And then in this article, at least, they talk about this woman. Well, first of all, they have a screenshot of the Wuhan Virology Institute where they have a job listing on there, supposedly, to come study bats and coronaviruses. And this was in November. And then, so obviously, this was right before the whole outbreak of it. And then this woman who worked there, according to this, she disappeared. China said, "Oh no, she moved. She moved to a different region. She doesn't work there anymore." Yet they like deleted her off the website and all this stuff. And a lot of people are saying that she might have been patient zero, and then it got out from there.
Well, first of all, of course, they would be studying it. Not studying bat-related viruses after the first SARS epidemic would be negligent, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah,
So that's the first, thing to remove from your whiteboard. That, of course, they would be studying that in China. The other is, I it's an interesting. Well, it's not. You can't know. It's a claim. She's patient
Exactly.
zero. Okay, what kind of evidence would you seek to disprove that theory? It would be very hard, right? Unless she turns up alive and said, I never had anything like it. And then you can say, well, China is lying, right? You're making her lie. So that's a never-ending conversation. It could be,
True.
I don't know. But what I've seen is that there has been speculations that it's been around for a while. That there are cases from the fall of 2019 that are similar in nature, but they were never tested, right? Because it was just the order of the day. and that this thing started when they started actually doing testing, or because it started spreading really, really fast in a very densely populated area of China. So it might have been in the population for quite a while, but you had that local outbreak there that made them concerned because of that one guy, who was selling meat. So the notion that it started, that patient zero is actually in Wuhan, well, maybe. I think the history books will be more accurate on this than we are now, if you see what I'm saying. Producing theories on how this started is going to be somewhat difficult, I think.
Yeah, it's
It's
almost impossible to ever know, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
it sells paper. It sells papers. I'm pretty sure that 10 years from now we will know, right? Because then you'll trace it back and you'll follow the genes of it and you'll see, the mutations, and you'll know where it started and where it spread. But knowing that now, I'm thinking that's pretty hard for anyone.
So it's almost inconsequential right now if it came from a Chinese, if it accidentally came out from them studying it naturally to it coming about from pangolin or through a different animal from bats.
Yeah, well, if they had it in the lab, then they must have gotten it from somewhere, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So it's the same thing. It basically just comes down to being able to blame China more for it,
Yeah,
right?
and it's a Hollywood notion, these scientists sitting in a lab and actually constructing viri that you're able to, as if you're creating a destroyer or a fighter jet. It doesn't really exactly work like that. It's harder to construct a virus than people think, and
You mean
having it
there's
act as you
the-
will, right?
you mean the F-22 doesn't grow on trees naturally?
And it doesn't grow in bats, at
No
least.
fighter
Well,
jets. Yeah.
well, that's the difference here. Viruses tend to be creations of Mother Nature,
Right.
and F-22s tend to be creations of hyper intelligent engineers, and those two causalities rarely change places.
Yeah, so it's more of the whole issue, I guess, is more of it was the fault of the Chinese that it got out of this lab. They tried to cover it up, and we are where we are now. I guess that's
Well, I had a professor of biology many, many years ago who said that the number of people on this planet and how densely populated they are, we are 10 years beyond where we would expect a pandemic. And he said that, in the 90s, early 90s sometime, right? That we should have seen that in the 80s. So it's not like, oh, blame, this wouldn't have happened if China hadn't. Well,
it would have been something else then, maybe.
yeah, probably. We the years between 1970 and 2020 were years where human beings almost didn't have to think about diseases at all in the Western world.
Yeah.
And th- thinking that would last forever, well, we managed nature in a way, with modern medicine, but but to think to from there to thinking this can go on forever. ah, well, at least this one professor of biology expected this, many, many years ago. So, and here we are.
Yeah. So I heard some comedians say, "Remember how great the world was a week ago? Just a
Yeah.
week ago. Remember a week ago? That was great times a week ago." But so that brings up the final question I have, at least, is what is the world going to look like after this? And obviously, there's a lot of different possibilities, like we were talking about, whether or not you develop an immunity to it and
Yeah.
different things like that. But what do you foresee uh, the next few months, and even then after that, the next few years? What do you think will change because of this?
Oh, this is my favorite part of a conversation where you get to fantasize. That's so much. That's so much more fun than having to read studies. Well, it depends on the immunity thing, right? If it burns through and people become immune, then Italy is finished. Then Italy is finished with their problem. Then it dies down in Italy, and things can go back to some version of normal. Uh, I don't know. I'm not an economist, so I couldn't tell you where Italy would be in terms of economy and daily life. But at least they would be able to return to normal, right? Because most of northern Italy, at least, has had this thing. Now, if there's a second wave, then you're in another situation. Then this, I was told by my local hospital and the National Guard here, is an 18
Hmm.
months scenario. If there's a second wave, it's a 36-month scenario. Then you're talking serious changes to society, probably.
Oh yeah.
And I was asked this question, how, okay, if let's say worst case scenario now, then we ended on worst case scenario last time. Worst case scenario this time, if the lack of immunity fear turns out to be reality, then society would have to change. And somebody asked me, what does that mean? What kind of change? And I said, well, I remember my childhood. You didn't have supermarkets. You had butchers and bakers. And you couldn't walk into the bakers and just, feel up his bread. You went into butchers and you said, I want one of these, or I want a nice piece of pork at the butcher's. And he would pack it and hand it to you. And he was wearing protective gear as he did that, because those people were educated in a time where diseases were common. If you understand why my point is,
Yeah.
that kind of that way of shopping, that way of living, um, the the population, you could see people going to stores with gloves, as late as the 80s, because they've lived through the diphtheria epidemics of the start of the 1900s. So worst case, then, if it doesn't go away, you would have to revert back to the way of doing things they did up until the
It's gonna be a big
yeah.
jump back in time.
And you can't have a supermarket. Yeah, you can't combine a supermarket and the polio virus, and the supermarket wouldn't, then you would kill everybody. So this means that, yeah, yeah, society can survive this, but you have to revert back to another way of doing it, back to having butchers and bakers.
Uh,
What does that mean for the economy? Well, it means the end, I guess. I don't know.
so one of the graphs you sent me was about hydroxychloroquine. I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that real quick.
Oh yeah, it's a study from Nice in France, and it's been criticized, and the guy producing it has been called a fraud by some people. I don't know. I don't think, but as it is here, and it started a rumor and several other studies into the use of hydrochloroquine in combination with azithromycin as treatment for this thing. And it's an anti-malarial drug. And why it works is anyone's guess. But as you see from that figure, the effect seems to be significant. And if you look at the p-values, the lower a p-value is, the more probable it is that the cure works. And the p-value above day 5 for that combination of treatments, hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, is 0.002, meaning it's evidence. It's significant enough to be regarded medical evidence. So there are a lot of hospitals now using that combination to see if it changes outcome, and I'm guessing the studies will be um, publicly available in the next weeks, days, months. Um, where do we want to go from this? Should we discuss why it works? Because there's a couple of hypotheses there, but that becomes medical technical stuff.
Yeah, just whatever you feel is necessary for our viewership. I mean, we're not scientists or anything most of the time, but You know, what do you
Depends.
think we should know about it? Because a lot of people think it works. A lot of people thinks it's complete horseshit. You know, like
Yeah.
what do you feel about it?
I have some in the basement.
It's not it's not fishbowl cleaner, is it?
It's not, say again, it's not.
It's not in the form of fishbowl cleaner, is it?
No, that's another type of chloroquine. That's a phosphate thing that will poison you.
And also there's a whole bunch of other chemicals in there too. than
Yeah,
just
so I
pure,
would recommend that. You need the actual tablets for malaria. That's also used for anybody who has Sjögren's syndrome, which is an anti-inflammatory drug in that context, which brings us back to the point that we were discussing earlier. Is this a hypersensitive autoimmune reaction? And that's one possible hypothesis to why chloroquines are working, because they're actually immunomodulators. The other I've seen is that there is some evidence that the virus or the immune system is actually attacking the red blood cells of the victims, and that's a big part of the mechanisms leading to death. And chloroquine, being an antimalarial drug, protects red blood cells. So that's the two main hypotheses as to why this is working. And as you can tell, the scientific community is already divided on, well, first, is it working or not? Nobody knows. Why does it work? Well, we have this theory. So it's one of those things that if you follow it, it will be like a slow motion horse race. The answer will be there in 3 months or something when the rest of these studies are out there. And then the research begins as to why does it work. The take-home point perhaps being that right now everybody is researching every treatment that will show itself effective. Because I mean, I've never seen. Well, you get to see that now. You know, a scientific community working around the clock to come up with something, anything, a treatment or a cure or whatever, as long as it does anything.
Now, what's the difference between so you hear a lot about a vaccine, a treatment, and a cure. A cure would obviously be you already have it, and that would be to get rid of it, right, or to lessen the effects of it. And is that similar to a treatment then? And then a vaccine would be you don't have it, and that stops you from being able to get it.
Yeah, a vaccine would be an inactivated version of the virus, teaching your immunodefense system what it looks like in advance, so that when you get it, you will handle it immediately. Then you're betting your money on immunity.
Yeah.
That the immune defense system actually is able to learn from your vaccine. One of the problems with the coronavirus family is that they're so small. They're only 30,000 what's called base pairs. It's a short code of RNA, and you have to make sure that what you put in the vaccine does not trigger the immune defense system to attack the body itself, right? So there's a balance there. But that's a vaccine. A cure would be, I mean, like if you're pissing barbed wire, then azithromycin is a tablet that give you that will remove any problem forever, or until the next time you make bad decisions. If you see what I'm saying, that would be a cure, wouldn't it? Just one pill, and you no longer have the pain in your family jewels. A treatment would be a way to make sure that you don't die from it, and that would be the chloroquine and the azithromycin combination. You know, you are already ill. Okay, here's a combination of drugs that will shorten your. You'll still be ill, but it will shorten the time span, and it will not make sure it doesn't kill you.
So when they talk about therapeutics, that would be the same thing, pretty much as a treatment.
Yeah. But then you have adjuvant treatment, you know, like the ventilators. That would also be a kind of treatment, you know, because you're making sure that, he's ill, but he's not dying from it, because we're making sure he gets enough oxygen. So that would also be a treatment, right?
Is there any other form of vaccine, maybe that's not the right word for it, but is there another way to do it instead of trying to trigger the body to build up immunities to it? Is there another way that is used out there for anything else that
Yeah,
develops a vaccine without having to have to do that?
well, a vaccine is that per definition, right?
Right.
It's
So a
some it's
different word
some
that does the same thing.
substance. Yeah, a vaccine is something that educates the immunodefense system that you already have. If you vaccinate people who are in grave immunodeficiency, nothing will happen. It depends on your immunodefense system being able to learn.
So is it possible that there's a way to do it without doing that? So like I said, the vaccine might not be the right word, but is there a way to artificially give you an immunity without having to have
Yeah,
to trigger your body?
yeah, that would be prophylactic drug treatments. Like if you put in type, let's say that this chloroquine thing checks out and it actually has that effect that the scientists in Nice reported, then you could technically give that as prophylaxis to the entire population to make sure that nobody dies. Same with antivirals and some of the drugs which were developed against Ebola that didn't have an effect on Ebola, but there has been some reports that they have effect now, and we will see where that leads. And then you can technically produce that in billions and use that as prophylactic drugs. There are monetary investments here, that's another thing. You can make a lot of money on this if you can get a treatment or
Oh, yeah.
a prophylactic drug passed. So even though it's dramatic, one should probably lean back and be sensible and analytical and say, okay, let's see a couple of more studies by scientists who do not make much expensive or hard to make. The problem is that it's so cheap that nobody really bothered setting
No one
up the
wants to make
production line. Yeah, so nobody has the production line for it yet,
you lose
because
money
it's so
making it or something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You lose money making, and nobody's interested in it anymore, right? So yeah, you have to produce the production lines first.
Yep. True. So I would like to end on a positive note, but I was thinking of kind of a negative note. So I won't mention that one. Any other question, Eric, you want to bring up for Doc?
No, not necessarily. I have some stuff I want to talk about, but not necessarily with Doc. So just bring it back to me whenever we're done with that. I think
Yeah,
I'm
go
good.
ahead. I'm pretty much set. So go
All
ahead.
right.
I can think of a positive note and to end
Oh,
the
sure.
medical part of it.
Yeah, definitely.
You have the global scientific community working in Overgear. You'll learn a lot about medicine and virus by going through this.
I've already learned a lot. I knew nothing at all about any of this stuff. so yeah, even somebody like me who has no interest or never has any education, any of this stuff has learned a lot.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot of the labs and stuff, especially the DARPA and the national labs, they put a lot of money into these supercomputers, and we have these super crazy computers, and they've dedicated so much computing capacity to trying to figure out what we could do with it, right? That's what they do. They'll donate part of this computer to science, not weapons, and not killing people, to like actually saving people. It's kind of the counterbalance of our military complex that we have here in the United States. It's pretty great, but they've actually donated a lot of it back to the community to help save. So you're seeing a just not even just the scientific community, but you're seeing donations coming in from every single person everywhere, and you have people that are public servants that are trying to do whatever they can, even though they're probably going to get infected, which is crazy to me.
Yes.
Being in the military, you don't necessarily, unless it's like, obviously World War II, you join, you're going to get thrown into the shit, right? But, we were, I joined in 2002. It was right after 9/11. Like, there was a war, but we were like the best of the best, like we were, this wasn't Vietnam. This wasn't like World War II. Like, this is crazy for them. Like, this is their World War II at this point. And I feel like they're taking a lot of they're taking a lot at this point, and I feel for everything that those guys do, and so I really appreciate everybody that is a public servant out there doing EMS, any type of help with this crazy shit we got going on. So
Yeah, and the ICU staffs, because they are the ones at the absolute highest risks.
Oh yeah,
They're the,
I mean,
they're the heroes of this fight, you know. And I hope they will raise their paycheck at
Oh,
some
yeah.
point here.
I have a friend who's working in the ER in a hospital I won't mention, but I mean he's making a killing in overtime, but absolutely, and he deserves it too. But like I said, I live near a hospital. Every time I'm out walking my dog, I see people pulling in the parking garage, getting out of their car and getting ready, and every time I feel bad for them, but I'm also obviously very grateful.
yeah, definitely. And the last thing I want to do is I want to thank Paramount Movies. They gave us a bunch of free downloads to give away for Rogue Warfare 2. Here, let me drag it over here real quick so you guys can see it. We've been giving a few of them away. I've given a few downloads away during the podcast in the chat room. So if you guys ever hang out with us, you never know what you'll get. I didn't know this was coming, and I'm just getting a bunch of free downloads. So, but this is a cool movie. I mean, if you guys are interested, make sure you hang out with us after the show on Twitter. I've got some free downloads for this. So if you guys are in quarantine and you're bored, you got a good movie. This is it's a special ops movie by Saban Films, the same people that did Power Rangers. So I'm super excited about this. I haven't watched it yet, so I have a download for me. I'm gonna watch it tonight. I'm super stoked because I want to see how awesome this is. So,
am I gonna win one? I haven't got to see it either.
Yeah. I'll give. Yeah, definitely. So you win one. There you go. So I got.
Yes.
I actually have 6 more left. So I've actually given away 2 or 3 in the chat room. I guess I gave away Greg one now. So. We're gonna watch this tonight. We're gonna be hanging out. So, if you guys have anything else for me, I think I'm good. Anything else, Greg?
No, that's it, Doc. Thanks for coming back on again. I'm really glad we were able to get you back on again, especially after how the basis of what we thought was going to happen back in February did not happen. I know there's a lot of people stating that we were wrong about it. So I'm glad you were able to come back on and kind of clear up some stuff and then honestly talk about where we are now and what you think the future is going to be from here. So thank you for coming back.
I had an excellent time. I hope it was valuable. And being wrong is how you learn. It's like losing a fight. It's like losing a fight. You don't learn anything winning a fight. You learn losing a fight.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very true. So you want to wrap up on here, Eric? Maybe we'll end the podcast and you want to do something afterward?
Yeah, definitely. So we'll wrap it up here, and then we'll be online hanging out on Discord and Twitter, and probably going to hang out and watch a movie. So hang out with us.
Right. Sounds great.
All right, so that's it. Anything else? Everything else? I'm going to go and end the stream. You guys are good?
Yep, go ahead.
All right.
Kill it.
Enjoy your night.